The year of 2022 has less than 2 months left, and I'm sitting here wondering where the heck the time went. But what that means, it's time to talk about the Elder Scrolls Online in the next year ahead of us in 2023. I've said this many times, but 2022 wasn't ESO's best year in my opinion, and it might have been its worst since the launch days pre-2016. But looking forward to 2023, I'm hopeful that we will see some big steps forward going throughout the year of 2023. But for ESO to take huge steps in that year, there are 3 massive components that will make or break ESO in 2023. Let's discuss. Thank you so much for my patrons and my members. If you'd like to become a member or patron, check out the link below in the description. You get your name up here, you get access to our members only Discord, and you get many other perks as well, like badges and cool emotes that you can use in our live streams or in the comment section. But let's first talk about the typical ESO content release cycle, or the one that the game has been using for over 4 years. That is the chapter theme release cycle every year. Each year at the beginning, ZOS announces a chapter for the upcoming year that is the theme for that specific year. For instance, 2022 is the Legacy of the Bretons that went with the High Isle chapter. The year before was the Blackwood chapter, the year before was the Greymoor chapter, and before that it was Elsewhere, Somerset, and so on and so forth. These year-long themes shape what the content will be for that specific year. Within that year, there are 4 content releases not including events. So for quarter 1, we will get a dungeon DLC and a base game update that typically brings overhauls or maybe a new revamped system like the new champion point system or something of that nature. In quarter 2, that is when the expansion releases like High Isle or Blackwood or Greymoor, along with another base game update. In quarter 3, we get another dungeon DLC, which, by the way, dungeon DLCs are 2 DLC dungeons that you can play through if you have ESO Plus or you buy them outright. And then along with that, you get another base game update. And then in quarter 4, we get sort of a mini expansion where we get a new zone, a continuation of the story, and another base game update that sometimes brings massive quality of life updates, except for really this year, which we really didn't get much from this update this past year, which was kind of disappointing. But that is the typical cycle that ESO has been using for a while now, and while it is nice to have content every year, the last 2 years of content, in my opinion, have just been lackluster. The same old cycle is kind of getting old, and it's actually burning out a lot of players because every patch something changes or something drastically changes someone's build. And this brings us to our first massive component that will need to be answered to make or break ESO in 2023, and that is, should ESO abandon the every year chapter cycle? This is a controversial topic, I believe, among the community, but a good bit of you in my live streams have actually supported my ideas of ESO taking a year off from releasing a major chapter to work on existing systems and fixing different things in the game. The counter to this argument, however, is that ZOS is a business and they have to make money and they have to generate hype around the game, and so announcing that there isn't going to be a chapter release next year isn't really a great marketing or PR move, and it's really not a sexy thing to hear. And it would probably hurt the data and it would hurt the numbers. But I truly believe that this is kind of what ESO needs the most, unless something happens, which would be a miracle, which I will get to here a little later in the video. And so moving on, I am seriously a huge fan of ESO taking a year off. A lot of other MMOs do this. WoW and Final Fantasy come to mind when I think of MMOs that don't release a major expansion every year, and I think what this allows is honestly just to create a better, more polished product with more content in general. ESO is sort of in this we need as much content as possible right now, when in reality what it's doing is actually just creating new systems every year at the surface level and then really just leaving them untouched. A perfect example of a system that was a great idea that ESO just basically abandoned is the Oblivion portals. I've talked about this before, but these portals could have been a roguelike event or a tower kind of thing with tons of possibilities, but instead you just run a couple of them, get a few achievements, get some mythic leads, and you're basically done. It's a surface level system that was created and not polished beyond that. ESO is basically littered with systems like this in the game where they make a system and it's a great idea, but they don't really expand much. A great example of a system they did implement really well was the Antiquity system. The system gets updates every patch and it's a big part of the game now. Imagine if ESO took a year off from releasing a new expansion and revamped all of its old systems and brought depth to them. I think the game would actually have a lot more replayability for veterans and even new players. Unfortunately, I'm pretty sure Rich had mentioned in a live stream a while back when someone asked if they could fix the Dragonstar arena like times between rounds, that he said basically simply that they didn't want to spend hours on fixing an old system or old content, and that they wanted to focus on more newer things. Now, that's not a direct quote, but it was along the lines of this, which honestly kind of sucks because that kind of tells me ESO isn't really looking to revamp anything according to those kind of comments. But if they aren't going to revamp anything, have we actually had any confirmation of where we're going next year? I haven't personally seen any. I have no idea what the next chapter of ESO could be if they are doing another chapter. Personally, I feel like they might need to do a chapter that is going to bring back some Elder Scrolls fans. Like Greymoor or Skyrim was a massive year because they brought back a lot of those Elder Scroll fans that like Skyrim. They're like, oh, Skyrim? I'm gonna give this a shot. So I don't know what that looks like, but if you have any confirmation or know any rumors surrounding what could happen next year, I'd definitely like to know down in the comment section. This leads to the next massive component that will make or break ESO next year, and that is, will the servers be fully upgraded by next year? And the third sort of pseudo massive component, will they abandon the PS4 and the Xbox One support? Because that will change a lot if they do both of these, but it will also give us a good idea of what's coming if they don't do both of these. So realistically, what are the expectations for each scenario? Let's talk about the first one. If the servers are fully upgraded by next year and they abandon the PS4 and Xbox One support, ESO could have a massive year. It was said a while ago that the reason we aren't seeing any new animations or anything basically drastic in the game that's new is basically because they're at their limit with the older generation consoles. So what that translates to is until they basically figure out another way or abandon old hardware, there will realistically be no new class, animations, weapons, or anything groundbreaking. Hence why we got a card game this year. Also, with servers, if they fix PvP issues, then that also opens up the doorway to another class, weapon, and much more. Because they don't want to make a new class and then have to rebalance everything next year, especially when they're in the process of fully fixing that side of the game right now. So if servers are upgraded and they abandon the older generation consoles, I think realistic expectations could be very high. They could launch a new class, new weapons, a brand new system into the game. They could even potentially add more extensive physics into the game. They could also revamp other areas of the game as well. Expectations are kind of unlimited if those dream scenarios happen. Now, what if none of those scenarios happens or only one? Then expectations are pretty limited, and I think we will have a good idea of what will be coming in 2023. This is actually the best case scenario, however, for those of us that want them to take a year off and revamp old systems. But if they do release another chapter next year, which is most likely going to happen, then maybe this update 35 fiasco this past year will point to what their plan is for this next year. Maybe they're trying to dumb down the combat system more, or maybe they're changing the combat system or revamping how the game plays. You know, they're always a year ahead. So they obviously did that combat change for a reason, probably for something next year. So obviously they had some sort of vision for it. Maybe there's a new system they're putting into the game that complements that combat change. Maybe they're adding 5-man dungeons, maybe adding a support class or role. I'm not really sure, but I do know that it seems like they were trying to make the game easier and easier as the years go on. So it would kind of maybe make sense if they added 5-man dungeons to give it an easier chance or something like that. I don't really know, but it kind of makes sense to me. But I do know that if this scenario happens, then it will be a lot easier to kind of predict what kind of update we are actually getting. My dream next year, though, however, would be for them to revamp all the systems in the game and add an engineer or a bard class. That is my pipe dream. The game is set up to have a bard or engineer class, and it would fit the playstyle of the game too, in my opinion. There's bards literally everywhere in the game. But what are the chances of any of that happening? Probably pretty low. But all in all, ESO in 2023 is really hinging hard on these three massive components. Will they take a year off of chapter releases, and will they upgrade the servers and abandon the older consoles? Once we get closer to the announcement of next year's plan, or when they announce it actually next year, will be the only time we will really have an estimate or of a trajectory of ESO in 2023. I really want ESO to succeed, and especially I want it to succeed next year. I think it has an opportunity to. But if they don't upgrade servers fully and abandon the last gen consoles, I would just rather them not release a chapter at all and just work on bringing depth to base game systems and current systems in the game to fully polish them. I would love to hear your thoughts though on this matter and what you're expecting of ESO in 2023. Let me know down in the comment section what you guys think of this situation. And if you guys did like this video, make sure to like and subscribe because it does really help the channel out. And you can check out all these videos up in the top corners here that will lead you to more ESO content or just other games. But until next time, y'all, just remember, have faith, be great, and I'll see you on ESO.